have an announcement and a complaint.
Ooh, announcements.
Okay, announcement is I'm wearing my Verify in Field shirt from The Hustle Architect.
Ah, nice.
Yes, I like this shirt. I'll put a link to it in the show notes.
How many times have you used Verify in Field as a response to someone?
I don't
Or
think
vice versa.
I mean, I've seen it a lot. I mean, that's why I like this shirt. But
Yeah.
it was my son was like, "What does that mean?" And I had to go through this big old process, and I said, "And then there's the shirt, right?" Which is a play on words. So
yeah,
I'm going to put a link to it, and the proceeds for the shirts go to things that are worth pursuing. So I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. My complaint now.
Well,
you need to hear my complaint. No, I'll be moving. No, go ahead.
You need to go to the complaint department. Somebody, I'll give you a quarter to call somebody who gives a. Anyway, yeah. What you got?
I sent you some pictures the other day.
Oh,
I got no response. I got none. I got nothing. And I was expecting something. Like the whole point of sending images to other people is to elicit a response. And so I kind of have a sense of why I didn't get a response, because my photos just weren't good enough, is what I think.
Yeah, because that's usually a problem with you.
Well, they weren't amazing photos or anything. So I could see why you might think this, but there's an angle here. I have an angle that we need to discuss. So I sent you some pictures of the Milky Way. Do you remember receiving such images? You can't say no. You can't cop out.
We'll say yes. Sure.
Oh, man. You make me sorry I even brought this up, aren't you?
The candy bar?
Yes. No, not the candy bar.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
yes.
Gosh.
I actually, now that
you're like scrolling back right
No.
now.
Now that we're talking about it, yes, I do recall said.
These are not amazing photos. I granted, but these are handheld shots with an iPhone 13 in Joshua Tree National Park with a 10-second long, computer augmented stabilization system. This is DSLR quality from 7 or so years ago, I want to say. They're not amazing images, but it is absolutely incredible what you can do with a handheld photography device /phone /alarm clock nowadays.
Yeah. You say that now I recall, and apologies for not
ignoring. Just
ignoring.
Full on ignoring. Those aren't good. Those aren't good pictures.
No.
That's what I got.
That's what you took. Apologies.
Those stupid Milky Way pictures that you shot with your candy bar sized device, holding it with your hands.
Exactly. Well, what's amazing about this, and actually, I remember back when I had an iPhone 8, and I was sitting next to you, or standing next to you, actually, while you had 12, and you were in DC, and you were taking a picture, a nighttime shot of the Jefferson Memorial. That's where we were at when you first did first it was a longer exposure, and I was really amazed at the fact that, which is one of the reasons why when the 13 came out, I went and got one of those, even though we both have fancy DSLRs, because you've actually said it best. The best camera you have is the one that's with you. I know, but you've said it a few times, and because as you say that with the images that you took at Joshua Tree, that I shamefully
Freudian slip there. Dang.
Exactly. Did not respond to. I belong to a Facebook group for parents of students who go to Northern Michigan University, and most recently they've been having a lot of Northern Lights happening there, and some of the photographs of some of the kids who've been taking kids who've been taking pictures of the northern lights
Who just have
are
iPhones or whatever.
who just had, well, iPhone 13s or 13 Pro or whatever. But I mean, the pictures that they're taking are amazing. I mean, you get to see, the ribbon effect. You get to see kind of like a little bit of streaking. You get to see stars in the background. Every once in a great while, the memories come up of like pictures that you took, I don't know, a decade ago or so on Facebook. It's just like, share a memory from 12 years ago. However, wow, look at the quality of that picture. And I even recall
You're like, I am not going to reshare that picture.
Exactly. It's just like, maybe not.
Right.
And I even recall the pre-iPhone pictures that I'd taken on my Palm Trio 750.
Fancy camera.
Exactly.
I'm a fancy pocket camera.
And that one was like one of the fancier, nicer cameras. And it looked like the pictures that were taken of Bigfoot.
Yeah. Nessie.
Exactly.
Yep.
And it is really honestly amazing how far technology has come.
Yeah. End of rant. That's all. It is incredible. It's handheld. Like, and when I say a DSLR of like 7 years ago, I mean like on a tripod, like locked down, right? It's doing a 10-second long exposure handheld is obscene. That's even something that it attempts to do, right? So
I attempted to take some pictures of the bridge, the Mackinac Bridge, and the long exposure, the 10-second long exposure. They didn't turn out very well. But
yeah, I know it has to be like the right conditions. I'm like holding it against the bed of my truck as hard as I can, trying not to move at all.
You're the human tripod.
Yeah, I'm using anything I can
Gotcha.
to stabilize, because I think the max handheld really is about 3 seconds. That's kind of their standard long shutter. If you go deeper in the settings, you can go longer than 3 seconds, but at that point you really have to be kind of as locked down as you can be. So
right.
No tripod though. I mean, it's does the truck count as a tripod?
Yeah, it depends.
I guess.
I mean, it could.
It was pretty cool though. Like we went out there, it's been epically hot. I mean, it's incredibly hot in Southern California. It's funny if you look at like the picture of the whole world, it's the hottest place.
Yeah. Actually, funny enough, when you sent me that picture, the screenshot of how hot it was where you were and working on a project in Riyadh, the high for you was higher than the high for Riyadh.
That's incredible. Right.
So perspective there, man.
Oh, yeah. So we went out and spent the night at Joshua Tree. I got a campsite out there, and we just camped out and slept in the back of the truck looking at the stars. It was a new moon, so it was a great night to watch Milky Way in a dark sky area, and it was just amazing. You could see it. No telescope needed. It was absolutely incredible. So. It was surprisingly not too hot at night. I think it got all the way down to 74 degrees, which was fine. We're totally fine for sleeping outside.
Yeah, that's the high today.
Oh, shut up.
It got
up to like 108 the other day. It's just to put a number on it. And actually today though, it's been really humid because some raindrops fell from the sky here in Southern California today. Supposedly there's a hurricane moving its way up from Baja California into our region, which probably is going to wreak havoc in Joshua Tree and Palm Desert. There's going to be some major flash flooding and like roads are just going to disintegrate.
Rename the Pacific typhoons as hurricanes.
I guess so, because I think they did. They've appropriated the terminology.
Can't Florida just keep one thing? I mean, everybody.
I think everyone would be happy if Florida kept a lot of things in Florida.
Exactly. I mean, there's now Florida man everywhere in the country.
Every state has their version of Florida man.
Yeah.
Oof. That's a good meme worth following. If anybody is like, what are you talking about? Well, you got anything worth talking about?
Well, so as one would expect, there was a follow-up to this conversation about quiet quitting.
More information. Yes.
More information. So, although it was kind of interesting. Before I get into this article that I was reading, there was just memes floating around about that, and they were like, and one of them was just like, quiet quitting really isn't a new thing. I mean, Gen Xers have been doing quiet quitting since they entered the workforce. All it was just, setting an expectation for yourself. And I was like, that's interesting. However, I know plenty of Gen Xers who don't follow the quiet quitting or setting boundaries and, working your 9 to 5.
Well, yeah, there's that part of it, right? Which I think Trevor Noah had a quip about this, which was like, we used to call it doing your job.
Exactly. So not only was there an article, from the New York Times, but then read something in the Washington Post as well. And then, of course, all of the memes followed. It's just like, because of quiet quitting, now there's the quiet firing. And you're like, huh, of course, in a way, because I've been talking to a handful of people, just, our close, knit friends and stuff, talking about their impressions of it. And, because they range in ages, millennials, Gen Zers, Gen Xers, and if you're not willing to give that 110% or, go above and beyond, there are people out there willing to do that. And there's obviously conversations that we can have about it, that why is going above and beyond the demand for at least the standard? So if instead of going above and beyond, just say I expect a decent level of attention and prioritization of your work throughout the day, maybe not like, spending time on your phone and stuff like that, just focus on yours, which most people that I know actually do, just do that, or because they may end up working, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, then it's okay to maybe every once in a great while check your phone or look at life outside of your computer screens and things like that. But they were talking about this. Now, again, most of everything that we've talked about on last episode and, potentially today doesn't really, none of these articles really deal with the architectural world. And sometimes don't really apply to kind of like the life that we live or have chosen to live or have subjugated ourselves to living, or however you want to put it. The point that they were making is like, if you're not willing to give it your all and give it 110%, that above and beyond, then there are other people out there. And I'm like, boy, are you like completely out of touch with the reality of the job market? Because guess what? No, there aren't. There are not people out there right now. Everybody's looking for anybody, as I jokingly refer to it, as a breath and a pulse.
Mm-hmm.
There is no help coming. You can scream all you want to, and no help is coming.
It's like a horror film. Yeah,
exactly. What I got out of the articles were, how fair is that to your team, that if demanding more than, your 40 hours a week is the standard, then pay them for those additional hours. Pay them the time and a half, or readdress their salary the way that they do it, or give bonuses or something else, or provide comp time above and beyond your normal agreed upon PTO. Something to actually say that if you're willing to put in the extra effort, because let's be honest with you, architecture, we somewhat demand extra effort because of the way that the system works right now, right? That, sometimes as we were talking about the poor planning, sometimes we just have to pull a few extra hours. And so if we are pulling those extra hours, if you are expecting somebody to go above and beyond, why not reciprocate that gesture that they're giving you, because you've agreed upon a certain allotted amount of time to then give back to them. And that's where the disconnect of a lot of these, people who are drawing the line in the sand when we talked about some of the stance that people had in, when we were talking about some of the comments on the Andre Architect site. And when you read some of the comments from some of these articles where people are just like, back in my day, we just put our head down and did the work until we had to. And if it was 80 hours, it was 80 hours. It's like, I'm sure your children really loved that. Oh, you didn't have time for children? Okay, then. You
Well, I
know,
mean, this is actually the subject of the current place I'm in a book that I'm just started reading called From Strength to Strength. Did I tell you about this already? So it's a book by an individual named Arthur C. Brooks, and he's basically laying out a thesis of these two curves in life. There's like this initial curve called the fluid curve, and then there's this later curve called the crystallized curve, and it's all about successfully navigating from one curve to the other. Because as you know, you're most, especially in creative fields, your most creative and your most innovative ideas come at earlier ages. They come in your 20s and maybe in your 30s, but there is a decline that happens to everyone naturally, and we are very much in denial that this happens for the most part. And so later on in life, when you just don't have those creative, innovative ideas anymore, but you still want to be having them, like that's where the denial comes in, or you feel like you still have them. But there's actually this kind of shift that needs to happen from this, what they call that fluid intelligence, to this crystallized intelligence, which you become more of a teacher and a mentor, and your role changes. And not too many people who are very much strivers, is what he calls them in the book, are kind of well positioned to move into this crystallized intelligence, because they long for those fluid intelligence things so badly. And I see this so much in architecture, right? It's very much kind of I don't know, the ego has a lot to do with it. And obviously we've always been we've been trained to work like this and to think like this and to solve these kinds of problems and to work people through these big ideas into something that becomes an actual thing. And there's a lot of glory and authorship and success in that process. And then there's like kind of this other dirty side of it, right? Which kind of gets to this quiet quitting stuff and the toxic cultures and things like that, that actually are the engine behind the things on the surface. But this idea of moving from this one curve that naturally declines and jumping onto this other curve that actually extends your career and your usefulness, and that's something you can get a lot of satisfaction out of a lot longer throughout life, is very interesting to me, right? So it just made me think of that, because this whole idea of moving from one into the other and becoming a teacher and becoming a mentor and enabling others to be their best innovative creative selves at their younger ages, which is a very natural human thing, and getting a lot of satisfaction out of that for all the parties involved could be a very big thing.
I'd say that, as interesting as that sounds, and it really does, it also worries me that extending your usefulness, you're never going to retire.
Well, people are living longer too, right? But yeah, I think that was kind of a common refrain as he was researching the book, was like, I'm going to leave this profession horizontal, not vertical.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if you're really finding that satisfaction and you really are useful and you can provide more for the youth than others are, then that's value, and maybe you should be doing that because it's keeping you sharp and you're being effective.
And that's what I find is the interesting part, is because I do feel, let's just say that I don't know if I can't say that I'm in my twilight of my career, but I am, in the middle of the career where, there are extraordinarily bright young talent coming in that are just, because of the changing scope and changing, just landscape of architecture, both from the way that we design to the tools that we use to design and things like that, sometimes I do sit back and I wonder where my usefulness is. But then I sit down and I start to think about how I can, one, both learn from them, but also teach them. And say, okay, you've got all of this great useful knowledge of the tools to be able to create, but I've got the practical knowledge of being able to create.
Yeah, it's called experience and
Right.
wisdom, right? Like
Yes. Yes.
yes, those are things that are very prevalent in older generations and not as prevalent in the younger generations. And so there is a complementary nature to those things. I mean, that's something that we're very interested in connecting at Tect, right? This is one of the reasons I went to work at Tect, and one of the reasons we've built a platform to connect people is because there's so much information and data out there, but and those are kind of like the first things that a lot of people go to, right? Those are when what do you do when you're looking for something? Like what does anybody do who's in architecture? They Google it, right? It's like I go look for the thing on the internet, the all-knowing oracle of all things. Is it right? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to spend a few hours to try to figure that out. Okay, well, our thesis is, well, let's put you in contact with somebody who actually knows, and they can tell you in 20 minutes what's going to work faster than better information than you could get by downloading an outdated PDF and a detail library component that you have to modify 3 times over through it, and schedule a meeting with a project architect to get their lowdown, their input. No, like just talk to an expert. That to me is by marrying up these two valuable pieces of the puzzle, the young, innovative, creative with the older, knowledgeable, wisdom-based, experienced person, you get the best of all of it.
Yeah, because back to what I was kind of chatting about, that wisdom that we're just highlighting. I'll give you just a practical example of just some things that have been happening on my project is, we've got a bunch of trellises. Some of the trellises are wall mounted, and then others are just freestanding. And some of the ones that are wall mounted, I'm looking at the way that they modeled, and it's modeled where essentially we want to do that. But then when you cut a section through there and you're looking at it, it's like, okay, well, how do you make it stand? And that's where when they look at it, it's just like, well, that's, I don't want to trivialize it the way that because they're not this way. But when they say, well, this is the way that Revit drew it, it
Dude, this takes me back to that episode where we were talking about shade structures and how it didn't cast the shade where it needed to be cast.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Well, that's how we just drew it in the software, and it was
exactly,
fine.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right.
And so obviously, love the love-hate relationship, but the love Zoom to be able to like just grab my stylus and just start drawing over the top of it and say, well, for this to be able to do this, we've got to do this. And that's where the symbiotic relationship of people who know who have a mastery of the software, and pairing them up with the people who kind of understand how things stand up and how to be able to achieve a design, you can do it this way, kind of like what you're talking about, is marrying them up with people who have the knowledge and the understanding of how things go together. And that's where I kind of see my values being able to look at and say, okay, this is a creative design, but let's figure out how we make this design work, and then talk about what are the limitations or what are the opportunities of materials and things like that, and how we can actually achieve those design ideas. That's the thing that I think is where I guess it all goes back to where the value of the aging are coming from.
Well, what's funny is that there is a disconnect in leadership when it comes to attracting talent, which is, I think, a topic that we've recently covered. And right, we had that episode called "Know Anyone Interested?" and it was about the kind of lackluster job posts that are out there, where it's just like, "Hey, we're hiring," and they're not really standing out. But there's not a good narrative being painted here because that culture maybe doesn't exist in a majority of architectural firms across the country, which is, and this is a response to our episode that I'm going to read right now that comes from my boss, right? He said, "Love this episode. At the heart of this is a fair question. Are we, being unique, talented, opinionated, respect-worthy people on teams or bodies in roles?" What's the question that senior people ask a young candidate when they're sitting at the table? It's like, what software do you know? Do you know Revit? And I think this also kind of gets to the heart of this dissatisfaction that we're seeing in quiet quitting, right? Which is like, I'm just going to do the minimum because I'm not a respected member of a team that you see this bidirectional or symbiotic relationship happening on. I'm not learning from you. You're not learning from me. I'm a cog in your machine. And so guess what? I'm going to act like a cog in your machine, right? And that is kind of the backlash that you see from those older generation people on the EntreArchitect forum or anywhere. Like, it doesn't have to just be architecture, right? But it's just like, these people just don't go above and beyond. They're not striving like I was a striver. They're not hungry, right? They're not putting in they're not hustling for this. They're not bleeding for the project. And it's like, well, how do you treat them?
Yeah.
And I think this starts to lead into this kind of quiet firing kind of thing too.
Do you treat them like a tool that uses it's just like, I hired you to draft. I hired you to do these details. But these are the same people who are craving to learn, okay, I'm clicking away at all of this stuff, but what does it mean?
And because if they don't get a taste of that part of it that you just said, then they lose their taste for all of it.
Exactly. And then it's just like, okay, well, then why am I killing myself? Why am I staying till 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night to do all of this stuff for you when what is in it for me? And it's not a selfish attitude. It's a growth attitude. It's where's my personal development? You eventually are going to want to retire. You should be grooming me to take over your job so then you can take over the job that's ahead of you. And so then ultimately you can, ride off into the sunset. I mean, say that all the time. I was like, but nobody ever really thinks about that kind of succession of knowledge.
Leaders do, but that is you don't see it very often. Yeah. I mean, that's what leadership is.
Well, and maybe I'm a little jaded right at this present moment or whatever, but you would love to say that is what leadership is. But a lot of times leadership are trying to fill a void or this vacuum that they have of like, hey, we don't have enough people to do this job. We've said yes to doing this job. We've got to get this, we've got to get people to get this job. It's just like, okay, let's go hire some people.
So it's just a reactionary because they failed to plan, right?
Exactly. And so they don't ask that question. It's like, okay, what do you want out of the relationship that we're building here? We don't, a lot of times you're right. It is absolutely, let's sit down and talk about what what programs do you know? Not, okay, what programs do you know, but what do you want to get out of them? What are you lacking in your understanding of those programs or just how the implementation of utilizing that tool? Because, we know that they're only tools. They're computerized pencils, right?
Well, and look at the buildings that we're quote unquote designing. They all look the same, people.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's architecture form follows software, right? It's like, I mean, that I've been complaining about that for a decade at least. I mean, it's incredible to me to watch the design language. It's just basically how the push-pull tool works in SketchUp, right? That was where we started to really see that, and now we see it in all the tools because they're all trying to kind of get it down to this lowest common denominator, ease of use, and it's real. And that's to me what is so incredible about looking at all this AI generated imagery with MidJourney, and like this is a whole bucket of about to dump out here, right? But this is another subject. But like this stuff is inspiring. Guess what? The software we have, the software that most of us use, cannot do anything like this. We shouldn't even be talking about constructability and all of these things, but it's inspiring to look at, and this is why people are so freaking excited about it, because it's like, oh my God, we're dreaming again, right? We're not just modeling horizontal and vertical walls that frame some opening, and that we've seen on every single building today that's getting through construction.
Right. And it's funny that you said that. And I sent you this text, but a friend of mine, said, so after using MidJourney for over a month, in my humble opinion, it's going to dramatically increase the value of architects with technical knowledge and experience. If designers can't detail and figure out their own ideas, the AI will replace them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she's right. I mean, she's absolutely right. And so this is where that symbiotic relationship between the people who can use that software and really try to understand it, and the people who know how things can be put together. I mean, I've been able to, in my career, do some pretty creative things with kind of like just the standard off the shelf stuff that doesn't look or feel like it's standard and off the shelf, because I understand its possibilities and its limitations and try to morph and stretch and change things at my will, so that we can achieve a design that we actually like. And to be able to marry up people like that, like me, with people who have got, or the AI or whatever, that are able to kind of like push the creativity, but understand the constructability, is going to push us. And then, so going back to this, tying it back into quiet quitting and all that other stuff, rather than sitting back and saying, well, I'm only going to give you my, 9 to 5 because I'm not getting anything out of this. I'm not feeling growth. I'm not feeling like this is a two-way street. When you start to actually have these symbiotic relationships with, and I don't know if I'm using the term correctly, but I'm going to just, keep going with it for now. But this relationship between all of the different people's knowledges, I don't even want to say like the limitation of their knowledge. It's just like, because you can pair people up that have this knowledge and that knowledge and that knowledge and create some incredibly beautiful things if you work as a team, if you work together.
More than what you could have done
right.
with any one of those people alone. Just adding those traits together, it's the sum is greater than that. Yeah.
And instead of, so getting out of that silo and getting into the field where you're like able to graze. Can't believe I just said that. But anyway.
Architecture is a farm.
Yeah. Exactly.
And we're all.
Yeah.
Yep.
Moo. But honestly, I mean, that's when we as a team can really start to push each other. And that's when people start to feel the value of, oh, you're actually listening to me. Oh, I'm actually contributing. Oh, I'm actually learning things that I wanted to learn from you. And vice versa. Everybody could be able to say those little things that will actually help develop them. And so there's a growth in the youth, and there's an extension of the experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's not to say that no firm has this figured out. There are firms that definitely have this figured out. And I love reading people talking about working at these places and saying like, this is the best place I've ever worked. And like, I think a lot of times I see people posting things like that after they've left, like, cause they're going to go on and do something else. Like we don't have the same, it's not ethic. It's just like, we don't have the same feelings about working for a company for 30 years that my grandparents did. Right. So it's just like, no, I'm going to go try something else now. I'm going to do something else now. I'm following some other calling, something that's important. And they're then posting and saying like, look, these are the most amazing people I've ever worked with. These are the best projects I've ever done in my, and so they're incredibly, positive about, and so we know these exist, and they are the exception, right? I think that's the thing that I come back to with this is that like we are generalizing, but these places do exist. And I think what's interesting is when people do put it out there that these are the places that enable this kind of work, that enables this kind of team, that enables this kind of culture, those companies can capitalize on that. And then it makes its way back into the job postings if they're smart about it, and they can attract more talent that wants to work in that kind of a environment, right? And by doing all this, you do get the snowball effect started to just build momentum over time to say, like, we're changing the culture. We're changing the culture of architecture, capital A architecture. And that to me is when, like, that's where the real work is happening. So what is quiet firing? This was the follow-up, right?
The follow-up to quiet quitting is quiet firing, where they essentially say, okay, well, if you're not willing to put in that extra, we won't give you any responsibilities. You won't see the benefits of this. You'll just get your pay.
It's like a silent retaliation.
Yeah.
It's quiet.
It really,
quiet. I guess it's in the name. But this idea is that they're actually firing people, but minimizing the amount of information shared, right? Which is a huge complaint across the, I don't know if it matters what state you're in or what company you work for, but that's typically like the least information possible is shared because there is some fear that the retaliation train will continue.
Well, it's kind of like okay, if you're going to do the minimum, then we're going to do the minimum, and we'll see who breaks.
So, yeah, it's like a dare.
Exactly.
Who's going to break? Who's going to quit or get fired?
Exactly. Exactly. That's totally it. Yes.
This is a quiet game of chicken.
And if that's not a level of toxicity that is just absolutely horrid to our profession, I don't know what is.
And this is not aimed at our profession, but we do see it there. I mean, it's not like
it is. We do see it. I mean, unfortunately, yeah, as I said, the disclaimer of like these articles that I was reading, none of them were geared towards architecture, because this current state of the union for architecture, we can't, I mean, unless you're just horrible at your job. I mean, you're going to keep your job because we need people.
Yeah, right. There is some security right now in that.
Yeah.
Right.
The one thing that I guess we haven't really talked about is that, if there's quiet quitting going on, or if there's quiet firing going on, I mean, what has leadership or the employee done to address and have this conversation with each other to really kind of discuss, okay, well, why are you only doing the bare minimum? I only see your green light pops on. Let's go back to the tyranny of green light.
Man, we're just referencing every past episode recently.
Exactly.
This is amazing.
I see you at 8:30 and I see you leave at 5:30. I see you go away at lunch.
I see you. I see you
show
up at your computer when work is supposed to start, and I see you leaving your computer when work is supposed to stop. Why is that?
Exactly. Why aren't you putting more in? Why have you? And so these yeah, exactly. You laugh, sad tears.
Sad, yeah,
yeah. But I mean, it's just like, is anybody having a conversation about like, why are you putting in only the bare minimum, or why are you only giving that person the bare minimum? There are all sorts of conversations that need to be had, over this. That again, that's what I feel like right now.
I was like, where's this going? What, did you just have an aneurysm?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, because I mean, we've talked in the past about how, I've like been killing myself on projects, doing way too much overtime and things like that. And I am not on the side of the people who say you should continue to, you should just put your head down, do the job, get it done until you're done. I really am on the side of the people who are quiet quitting, because I've seen what it's done to me in just not being there, or overworking and sacrificing sleep and things like that. And I sit there and I'm like, well, why am I doing that? Or why am I putting myself through all of that? And I look at, and I've had this conversation, with a couple of people when we were riding the bus at the AIA convention while you were, stuck in a booth and I was riding back to the hotel. I, just started talking and you heard the comments about, I just can't get, people who just like put in those extra hours. It's just like, well, why are you asking them to?
Mm-hmm. Because of poor planning. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting that our generation and the generations before us are addicted to workaholism. And this is one of the points in this book as well. I mean, it actually showed that it is as addictive as other things like drugs, like sugar, like, there's many examples of things that people can get addicted to. Work is absolutely one of them.
Yeah.
And that is something that nobody's talking about here. And those are the toxic cultures that people are now pushing back up against because they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. And who are the people there saying, what do you mean? They're the workaholics, right?
And how many times have I said to you, hey man, I've worked 84 hours this week? Almost saying it as some sense of pride of like, ha ha ha, look at me, I've worked 84 hours. And you're just like, what the hell is wrong with you? Why would you do that to yourself?
Well, you're not just doing it to yourself.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? You're doing it to your family, to the people who care, who you hang out with. You're showing it as an example to your team. You're leading by example. And like, I can't even tell you how many times this has come up just as an example with my kids, where it's like one kid who's older does something. Guess what? All the younger ones want to do it too, whether it was quote unquote like okay or not, right? Like if they're pushing the limits in some way, they're going out with their friend and they're riding in the passenger seat when they're not allowed to drive with a passenger under a certain age, and they're talking about it. You're not only doing something you shouldn't be doing, you're setting an example to all of your siblings in this case that was okay.
Yeah.
And so the same thing goes for this at where the stakes are way higher, right? As far as like just kicking this can down the road of like acceptable behavior.
Yeah. Yes.
And it actually just takes tons and tons of grit, right, to break that cycle. That's what leadership is, though, right? It's like saying, nope, it's not okay. And like, I'm not going to do it anymore. And here are the reasons I'm not going to do it. And guess what? There's just as many reasons that I just can't even cite right now because they're just not on my radar. But they're there. Like these are invisible reasons. There are invisible reasons for that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, I understand why the quiet quitting is happening, the quiet firing. I know there's a lot of legal stuff that companies aren't willing to risk, right? So they're just not sharing that information. But I also understand why the ones who are the previous generations are complaining about it. I don't know where this is gonna, like, I think it's just gonna be an impasse, right? Like these companies that can't attract talent are just going to wither up and die, I assume, or they're gonna have to figure out a new business model by outsourcing their stuff overseas or whatever.
Right, because, I mean, how many times have let's say Evan walks up and it's like, hey man, I put in my 2 weeks. Everybody else is like, oh man, why are you leaving? What went wrong? Why, please don't leave. And then other people are thinking to themselves, like I would be thinking if I was like your PM and you came up and you said you're leaving, I'm like, oh crap, now I got to train somebody else. I don't have time to train somebody else and all this other stuff. Why didn't we take care of Evan, while he was here? Why don't, we've said it before, but I mean, why don't people invest in their people more than they invest in their projects? Because it's the people who are doing the projects.
The lifeblood of the project.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is your special sauce at the company. It's actually those people. It's not the projects, because like those people are what's going to make the project special, and the next project and the next project. Yeah. I think we've exhausted this one. I feel exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm going to quietly fire you.
No. I already quietly quit. Thanks for listening. This show is part of the Gable Media Podcast Network. See all the shows at gablemedia.com. That's GABLMEDIA.com. You can help support what we're doing here by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts to help get the word out, and don't forget to share it with your friends. We'd love to hear from you, so leave a comment on the website at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can find our entire catalog of shows. Talk to you soon.